Tagasaste is a leguminous, drought-tolerant fodder shrub which has made some of the poorest sandy soils in Western Australia highly productive. On deep, pale sands, Tagasaste can increase the annual carrying capacity from 1 to 2 DSE under annual pastures to 8 DSE with alleys of Tagasaste. However, when it is poorly managed, then Tagasaste can quickly grow beyond the reach of the stock, and if not brought back under control, there is the telltale legacy of large, out-of-control Tagasaste trees in the paddock. Who better to speak with about managing Tagasaste than Bob Wilson, the president of Evergreen Farming. Bob has extensive experience in managing Tagasaste on his property near Lancelin and also has a contract Tagasaste seeding and cutting business. We meet Bob at his property, aptly named Tagasaste Farm.
The farm itself is around 2,000 hectares, and which about half of that, about 1,000 hectares, is planted to Tagasaste, with another 400 hectares planted to subtropical perennial grasses, and the rest is with traditional annual pastures. Well, we are running all cattle on the farm. We don't have any sheep on here at the moment. We say we've increased our carrying capacity by 2 to 3 times with Tagasaste. We've just finished weighing some heifers that are putting on about 1.2 kilos per head per day over the last 3 months. That's a fairly common growth pattern over the sort of late winter spring period. That will slow down, and in summer, especially with our cow-calf units, we tend to just maintain weight. If we have animals that we need to put weight on over the summer period, that's when we do the supplementing with usually lupins as a supplement on the Tagasaste as well to maintain growth rate. Yeah, the main reason it seems that the lupin supplement is a benefit on a high protein diet, which the Tagasaste has, is the change in the acid base of the rumen itself. Well, Tagasaste is an evergreen shrub, so basically it's growing all year round, but in this climate we have here in Western Australia, obviously for the growing season, which is the 6 months of the year when we get rain normally, that's its main growth time. The 6 months dry period that we normally have over summer, it stays green, but its growth rate slows down, and as it goes under more moisture stress, it also has some other problems associated with that dry period. And that basically is the levels of phenolic compounds in the leaves start to rise. And the phenolics, which basically make the plant bitter, occur at 2 times of the year, or 2 main times of the year. One is after the plant is flowered, and so our whole management strategy is to try and stop the plant from flowering. So we graze it as hard as we can in spring to try and alleviate that flowering. But if it has flowered, it goes into its reproductive stage and the level of phenolic compounds in the leaves go up as a defence mechanism. It doesn't want to be eaten. The other time, of course, is during the moisture stress during summer, where again it comes under that stress period, and the plant's defence mechanism is to try and stop it from being eaten, so the level of phenolics go up again. I'm standing in a paddock of Tagasaste that was planted in 1987, so it's 25 years old now. The plantation was laid out in a double row, 2 metres apart, with 5 metres between the double row. And the rows themselves are running in a north-south trajectory. We did that in the early days because we were trying to alleviate the potential wind erosion, and most of our winds either came from the east, or the northwest, or the southwest. So we thought by running the rows north and south, we'd be able to go across most of those main wind directions. Now the Tagasaste here has been cut and managed so that it's under control, as we call it. This was cut about, the final cut was done about 2 months ago, and the paddock hadn't been cut for about 4 years before that. So since that period of time, we've had some cattle in just recently into this paddock, and they have grazed this down, although it does need more grazing, and we'll put cattle in again very soon. What we're trying to do with the Tagasaste is maintain it at a height here of a bit below a metre, and try to keep the plants in what we call a broccoli shape. Now basically that just means we want the new growth eaten down as it grows. So you can see that the main area here has been chewed down fairly hard by the animals and has new growth coming up from underneath it. I have in my hand a longer piece of Tagasaste, which comes from another plant that hasn't been grazed. This is in need of grazing very quickly. The cattle will graze what we call down to maybe pencil thickness of the stem, but I think this is not quite pencil thickness, but needs grazing very quickly to keep it under control. So we'll put 150 cows and calves into this 20 hectare paddock and run them around fairly hard for about a week, and then move them out, so that they'll then come back in again in about another 3 weeks after that. Our main focus with the management of the Tagasaste is to try and stop the plants from flowering. Now we either do that by great judicious grazing management, or occasionally we have to cut the plants to get them back under control so that then the stock can keep on top of it. So you'll notice here there's occasional flower, but that's in the main we've cut most of the older growth off, and so it's all new growth that's here now. So this is now very tasty, and the cattle will graze this happily for the next 2 or 3 years before we may have to cut it again. What we're looking at here is a row of Tagasaste that we're starting to manage, or cut and manage. Now what we've done is we've cut the centre out of the row of Tagasaste, the big branches in the middle, about 3 to 4 months ago. We're now allowing it to regrow in the middle so that it gives some stability to the Tagasaste, and then we'll come in and cut the edges off very soon, which will bring the Tagasaste plant back to a good hedgerow.
Well, you look around this paddock and we're looking at the height for one. This paddock was actually cut in the middle last year, so it's not as high as it could be, but it's getting out of control. We're looking to get all this fresh growth underneath exposed, because it's just getting shaded out as it is now. So we've got to open it up and let it rejuvenate. We aim to cut once every 5 years here, just to keep the plants rejuvenated and fresh growth on it, because once it gets this old leaf, the stock just don't want to touch it. So you keep it fresh and you don't have any problems. Flat cut across the top for a start, and that'll open it up. That'll leave the bush out like that, and then I'll do an outside cut, and I'll reach over the arm and do an inside cut, and that'll just expose the whole bush then. And usually we would have stock if we had enough cattle. They'd eat this stuff that sweetens right up after a couple of days, and really good fodder actually. And then just let the paddock rejuvenate. After about 3 months we'll have stock back in here, all freshly growing and beautiful.
Well, the thing with the Tagasaste is that it's been grown mainly on some of the poorest sands in the West Midlands area, or throughout Western Australia. And obviously these sands are deficient in every mineral known to man. But Tagasaste certainly has a huge requirement for phosphate, It's probably its main element that it needs is superphosphate. But when we plant Tagasaste into a paddock, it's not a monoculture. We have it planted in rows and we have the interrow in between. And the pastures that we grow in the interrow usually respond to potash as well. So we use the normal system of trace elements, super, copper, zinc, every 5 or 10 years, and super and potash every year. And in some of the poorest of the sands, we also find we've had a manganese deficiency. Our main challenge here every now and then is wingless grasshoppers over summer, which can affect the grazing of the Tagasaste. The wingless grasshoppers are a problem that occurs on our farm. They don't come from elsewhere because they don't fly in like locusts do, but they can cause problems because they occur around December, and the December period they'll eat the leaf, and even if they don't defoliate the plant, what the plant does, it actually reacts to the grazing of the grasshopper and increases its levels of phenolics. So two things occur. One is that the grasshoppers are eating some of the new green leaf that the cattle should be eating, but the other thing is the plant reacts as a defence mechanism and raises the level of phenolics in the plant, and so the stock don't eat as much anyway because it's become bitter. Here on Tagasaste Farm, we've planted all the Tagasaste we have a double row 2 metres apart, and we have an interrow of 6 metres between the double row. Now, we started planting that back in the late 80s when we knew very little about how the Tagasaste plantation should be set up. What we've discovered is that we probably planted those rows too close, and we tended to develop into a little bit of a monoculture. Our aim now in the sowings that we do around the state is probably a minimum of 8, possibly 10 metres between the interrow space, so it allows for a more of a balanced pasture mix. Back behind me in the paddock, about every 20th row, I've decided to leave a row of Tagasaste to grow up to its mature height, mainly just for shade and shelter during summer. And it's been great to be able to come out here in the middle of summer when it's 40 degrees and see the cattle utilising the shade from the Tagasaste.